all your senses are engaged when you're working with animals. And I think we're not fully appreciating how important that is for young people. We know that we've got 2 billion more people to feed. It's a really noble occupation to be able to feed our citizens.
Welcome to Unplucked, the official podcast of the Poultry Science Association. This is the podcast where we strip away the fluff and get real about poultry science from bench to barn. I'm your host, Andy Vance, Executive Director of the Poultry Science Association. Welcome back. It's been a few weeks. Hopefully you had a great holiday season with your friends and family and colleagues. A nice few weeks of gearing up for 2026. It's going to be a big year in the life of our association, a tremendous slate of meetings and events and opportunities for sharing the discovery, dissemination, and practical application of poultry sciences over the next 12 months. Today, we're going to dive into a conversation that's all about the next generation of leaders in science, in animal agriculture and poultry industry, and the way that poultry exhibitions are helping raise that next generation. We're joined by a longtime PSA member, Dr. Mary Fosnaught from the North Carolina State University Prestige Department of Poultry Science. Dr. Fosnaught is an expert in youth engagement and extension education specifically. From hands-on learning to public advocacy, Mary shares how the Youth Market Poultry Show at the NC State Fair is inspiring young people to understand and champion food animal production. I think a lot of us involved in agriculture got our start with the youth organization, particularly in the United States, 4-H, FFA, and the like. But whether you're involved in extension, education, research, or industry, I know you're going to find some valuable insights into the way that early experiential learning programs can help shape future advocates for the industry and the future of poultry science. Dr. Fosnaught, I'd love if you could start by telling us a little bit about your role at North Carolina State and what drew you into youth poultry programs in the first place.
Well, hello and thank you, Andy. So I am the extension associate for 4-H and youth development in poultry science. So you can think of me as the subject matter specialist for poultry youth programs. So I'm the faculty member that handles all our youth programs, which includes the Youth Market Turkey Show, as well as all of our 4-H programs. And I help support our FFA poultry judging events that happen. So there's a breadth of programs, but one of our favorites is the Youth Market Turkey Show that we do in conjunction with the North Carolina State Fair.
We're going to come to that in a moment, but I also want to give a nod. Tip, you and I last fall had the chance to spend some time together with a lot of young 4-H members and a lot of members of the PSA community involved in extension education at the National 4-H Poultry and Egg Conference in Louisville, Kentucky. And I mention that just to say, is for people who are wondering why we're talking about a North Carolina State Fair market show, I think you are a good representative, if you will, of several PSA members. I know there were more than a dozen members who were engaged in that conference when I was there at Louisville. And I wondered maybe if you would just say, before we get into talking about the market poultry show specifically, for people who aren't as steeped in extension or youth development specifically, I'd love to get your philosophy and maybe the broader philosophy of our extension community generally about the importance of youth development, 4-H, as part of this broader poultry science community.
Yeah, well, you're definitely coming to the right person because I feel like I'm in this position because I'm a product of 4-H. And it was the place where I first learned leadership skills and public speaking skills and project management skills. So it feels to me like a full circle that I'm able to give back in this way, in this position. So I liken that 4-H is the youth arm of extension. So it's just as critical. Those of us that are trained as scientists, we're vested in that. But those of us that, like you said, you maybe don't have an extension background, well, if we go back in our history, I think it's one of the brilliance of our program in like our education system of America is that we thought, how do we get all the great science that we're creating? How do we get it into the hands of our citizens? And so that's when extension was developed. But then the next step came is that we found that youth were early adopters of new technology.
Mm.
And we've known that from early on. And that's how 4-H, so the corn clubs, how they got started,
Right.
and that we knew that young people would kind of latch on and take a hold of new ideas more readily than some of us that are a little older, right? And more set in our ways. And I think that's how we've been able to push out a lot of great information. But then I think 4-H evolved into this youth development organization. So not only are we able to get information to our citizens, we're also helping to like actually grow our next generations of citizens through all the skills that we offer them, and opportunities, I think, too. So I would imagine you were like myself, that you had hands-on experience with animals and
Yeah,
you
true.
had that privilege and opportunity to have the resources to be able to do that. Fewer and fewer young people are having that opportunity nowadays. And I think it's just so fundamental to young people, right? Like animals and young people just go together, and those values and life skills that develop through that relationship with an animal
Mhm.
and stewardship of animals. So, yeah, no, I think it's such a great way to introduce so many opportunities to young people.
You're exactly right. I spent 10 years as a 4-H member, 4 years as an FFA member. Livestock projects were part of it. We lived on the farm, but that was not how mom and dad earned their daily bread in those days. They both had off-farm jobs, but that connection to food animal production was ever present in my life. And even though I'm not a farmer or producer today, I'm still involved in the animal agriculture industry because of some of those formative experiences. You hit the nail on the head, I think, in so many of those skills that we want young adults to have when they come into the workplace for members of a productive society, things like responsibility, hard work, discipline, but also some of the more critical skills like compassion, empathy. You do the great Temple Grandin. I love the title of one of her books, Animals Make Us Human. And that, as you described that title came to mind for me. So let's get back. I highlighted that one of the more visible ways that you and your colleagues at NC State are working with young people. I say more visible in that well, it touches a lot of students, but also the public are able to see this. The Youth Market Poultry Show at the North Carolina State Fair. Tell us about that partnership, what the Market Poultry Show is, and how it came to be this big part of your portfolio and extension.
It's a youth market turkey show. It started with Dr. Parkhurst, Carmen Parkhurst, and it was 2002. And he was the one that had this vision and created this partnership and collaboration with the state fair. So it feels to me that the North Carolina State Fair and the Prestige Department of Poultry Science, we are equal players in bringing this opportunity, because we have show birds at the state fair, but we don't have market birds. And with poultry being the number one commodity here in North Carolina, I think that's a missed opportunity if we don't see more visibility of market animals specifically for food animal production,
Yeah.
because I think that's unfortunate when we see this weightedness. We see all the horticulture and crop production and like the state fairs. For a lot of people, that's their impression of agriculture. And if they're not seeing market poultry, which is our number one supplier of meat in this country, represented there, then that advocacy that we have to like establish with our consumers starts to be disproportionate. That like they're thinking, when I'm seeing agriculture at the state fair, I'm only seeing maybe a few dairy cows or maybe a few market hogs, and not seeing market poultry. So I'm really glad that we have this component at our state fair, because it's too important. And by weight, I think North Carolina continues to hold the number one spot in turkey production. So
Mm,
Minnesota and North Carolina are always buying, but a number
sure.
ahead, I think it's Minnesota's number one. And
Mhm.
so North Carolina, which is surprising for a lot of folks that they don't know, but we're such a big turkey producer. So I feel like, well, definitely that needs to be present at our state fair. So I'm glad we have this show to help get that information out to the public and to the youth participants.
Well, I'm glad you made the differentiation, kind of between the show birds, so to speak, and the market birds. As somebody who grew up showing beef cattle, there's a very clear divide between the projects that come out of the show ring, so to speak, remember one time the big meme on social media was fluffy cows, right? And these were basically show steers that have been groomed up, and I could always count on an old cowhand saying, "Well, we don't eat hair," because these were cows that had all this. They'd been groomed to look a certain way. Most state fairs would have a commercial steer show or maybe a commercial lamb show where you're really looking at a carcass class, something along those lines. Having that market turkey show, though, to really drive home the point about the food animal production aspect of this, I think is really a great opportunity. Thinking back to our conversation about engaging young people in agriculture, you touched on this a little bit, and I think it's worth digging into why poultry is such an effective entry point for engaging young people in agriculture. What's been your experience there as to why that's a good hook to get some of those young people involved in our industry?
No, I agree. Like, I think we need to capitalize on that more because it's so accessible. So not all of us can have a steer in our backyard, but a lot of us can raise 3 poults. So the Youth
Sure.
Market Turkey Show, that's where these young people, they register in June, they get 3 poults, they rear those up and then bring back their best hen in October. That's when our state fair happens. So for 4 months, you're done with this project, and that's a quick turnaround. It's a kind of a low investment. A lot of families can get on board with that. And then you start to see the magic of the project, right? When you have those poults at home and then you see that transformation. And I think too, some of our best agricultural advocates are those young people that have raised these birds because they see how fast they grow. So one of those myths that you have to kind of overcome is like they must add something to the feed, and that's why they grow so fast. And it's like, well, these young people all know that if they feed their birds right, they will grow and be vying for a grand champion. So it's not impossible to do. And then with a little education, when you say that's the genetic selection, just like we've selected, and again, those myths we have to bust. They're not GMOs. We've selected for traits, just like we've selected in dogs or cattle. We've selected them for these animals to be meat animal producing livestock. So I think accessibility is one, and so like the cost point too for some
Uh-huh.
families, being able to get into that bigger animal species means more cost, and that's a barrier. Space. So when I say accessibility, it's on all those fronts. And I think again, you and I were fortunate because we got to grow up on a farm,
Right.
so we had all that exposure. But so many folks now don't have that exposure, so
Yeah.
they're a little intimidated by getting into an animal project. And so something like a turkey is a little less intimidating for them.
Sure.
And then and there's something I feel like the curiosity and the inquisitiveness of the turkeys just make them such a fun project. And so I think there's something specific. I mean, chickens are great too as an entry level project, but there is something really fun about having a turkey and how they come to you. And so for young people and for their families, I find that they're just as engaged with these birds as their young people are. It makes such a great project. And then
Mm.
then that's the stepping stone, right? Is that I really have enjoyed this process. And if you make it accessible, affordable, enjoyable, and something they can be successful at, because there are hiccups along the way.
Sure.
We with fowl pox likes to creep in during our summer months, and we want to do the right thing at the state fair as far as biosecurity. So if those fowl pox lesions are there, they may not get to show their bird, and
Right.
but again, that's a great life lesson
Sure.
that how important biosecurity is for the welfare of all birds, and we have to be stewards of all birds is what we try to make sure that we share with them. So learning those lessons along the way. But yeah, I think it is really accessible. And I find that I've got FFA groups, they're coming to this show. And so their teacher may house birds at their school barnyard or coop. And lots of different educators are starting to come in and take a part of the show. So that's exciting to see too, because then it's really resonating with lots of different population. So it is a unique show. We have 4-H members that participate, FFA members, homeschoolers. It's not specific to just one group or the other. And so it's nice to see all the different folks from all over the state come together at this show.
As you were talking about the development of the young people going through this and some of the skills they learn, at one point my ears perked up. You talked about the participants becoming advocates, really, and learning to advocate on behalf of the industry or just food animal production generally. I'm curious, the state fair, a lot of people come through the gates and are there and looking around, and maybe they've never been around a turkey before. Do programs like this help bridge the gap in your experience between the agriculture industry and the consuming public? And along with that, I wonder if you might share specifically if you've had any great experiences or observations of how programs like this prepare those young people to become industry advocates or advocates for farming, agriculture, food animal production more generally.
Yes. Like, I think one of the most powerful moments I've had with this program is that I've got many youth. So, since our state fair is in October and there's 2 extra birds that everybody has at home, they're getting 3 poults, but then they bring back only 1. And so it's a lot of youth are then raising the remaining 2 for their Thanksgiving dinners. So they're actually hands-on processing those birds and then having them for their families, and I just think that's such a powerful full circle moment, and so they become huge advocates in that there's so many people that it's the connection between raising an animal and eating the meat that that animal produces is one that the general public, some of us that have less background with that it takes a while to kind of bridge that understanding, but when young people can grab on to that and be on board with that and then advocate to their peers, I think it's really impactful. So I think that's where the advocacy amongst youth themselves as the producers and processors and consumers of their own animal food projects and production. The other thing I feel like that isn't said enough is that it takes a village running youth programs, that there's so many allied industry people that help. PSA is supporting us. Our North Carolina Poultry Federation is supporting us. There's so many sponsors, and like all together, it makes it possible. And thank you to all those people. We need as much support as you can get there subsequent production.
Well, I love that aspect of it because I'm going back again to my own 4-H and FFA experience. A lot of times we have that by showing beef cattle. If our county fair, if we were allowed to show 2 steers, but you could only run 1 through the sale at the end of the week, that other market steer we took home and put in the freezer typically, right? So for me as a young person, you were consuming that product at the end, so you could observe how all of the decisions you made about the animal's nutrition, care, housing, etc., affected the quality of the end product. It's a little less abstract then, right? That you're seeing this is how a producer makes decisions, even in kind of the wacky show cattle space, like because we were putting at least some of that product back in the freezer. And so I love that aspect of it. I'm wondering, because you're seeing some of the students do that with those additional birds that they don't take to the market show, you're probably, I'm guessing, back to this accessibility thing that you've talked about, getting some families that maybe haven't been experienced in turkey production before. What are some of the common misconceptions or concerns that families of exhibitors raise or the public brings up when they're at the state fair attending the show, and how have you and the participants addressed some of those common concerns or misconceptions?
Well, one of them we talked about is that you can actually raise a 16-week-old bird and it can be 30 pounds. So people are, when they see how large that bird is, they think that something must have happened. Maybe it's in our psyche to want to think that there's been some kind of alteration that isn't quite in keeping with the soundness of agriculture. And it's like, no, these have all been raised by youth, and yeah, in 16 weeks with the right genetics and the right nutrition, they do grow that well. And that's the efficiency of poultry, especially, is that we've been able to select for those characteristics and make some real improvements to have that breast meat yield and have that overall livability on a bird that is producing that much food production at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love about this is that opportunity for a knowledge transfer, not just from you as an extension educator to the participant, but also then, and this is one of the magic, back to our original conversation about the extension system and part of the land grant mission, that whole idea of taking the university to the people, or that idea of non-formal education and dissemination of knowledge. That's a great aspect of that. So I love that story. Thinking about kids today, right? And the older I get, the more I try to make sure that I'm not becoming an old man yelling at clouds or saying, get off my lawn. But what do you see as the challenges? And as somebody who's been involved in youth education for a minute, what are some of the challenges you face in getting young people involved in food animal production, whether it's in something like the Market Turkey Show or just generally as you're trying to get students on campus at NC State or to consider careers in poultry production or food animal production more generally? What are the biggest challenges you're seeing with today's young people and getting them engaged?
Well, we have a lot of great resources. So 4-H, FFA are doing great work engaging young people. I do think youth are more distracted than ever because we
Mhm.
have a lot at our disposal. And of course, and that includes devices. They keep us distracted. And then there's so many options as far as youth development options. And then I still think, I feel like I came to poultry science not as a young person, but when I was in college. That was the first I realized that poultry science was an option for a career path. And I liken it to the backdoor entry is that the first introductory animal science class happened to have an option to do a poultry judging contest. And that's what brought me to the industry. And I feel like we are still challenged with that. How do we let people know that poultry science is a front door career path and not something that we have to learn about after the fact? And I don't know, like, I'm surprised, especially here in North Carolina, where it's our number one ag commodity, why more people don't know that there are all those careers. I still think there's the idea that when you say poultry science, you're saying chicken farming. There are plenty, like, I would estimate probably, what do you think, 50% of our careers never touch poultry on a daily basis. So, probably you and I are both in that situation. We see poultry from time to time, but we almost never actively engage with poultry, but yet we're very much involved in the poultry sector. And so I think young people need to know that because I think there's such an imagery that's associated in your mind when you see poultry. It's like when you see a nurse, you have an image of what a nurse looks like. Or if you see a firefighter, you have this image. And I think the image that we're putting out there for poultry, like, who is a poultry professional? And it looks like somebody that is hands on with poultry, and they don't ever realize there's all these allied industries and there's all these scientists and all these health care providers that need to be involved in this. But then there's all those support. Like, I think of our own administrative assistant. We all have those, like the communications and graphics persons that all are helping each of us. We need all those folks to have expertise in both poultry and those skill sets. And I think we are seeing the value of interdisciplinary expertise. And I think we need to let people know that too, because I had one youth that was part of our national champion 4-H poultry judging team, and he wanted engineering and poultry science, and he ended up going to another state because it was hard to make that fit.
Mhm.
And so I think folks knowing about bio and ag engineering, that's one of our departments that kind of bridges that, because
Sure.
some folks, like, they need some of that more hands-on engineering aspect, but they still wanna be involved with animals. So knowing that there's these places where it's built into the department to be kind of interdisciplinary, letting young people know that, that's when I have a lot of light bulb moments with young people, is when they start to see that poultry science is so much more than just that image that they have in their mind When I think of companies that like Target is and BioResource International, they're these startup companies, in our areas that are doing these, like taking this amazing research and then moving it forward. Or when they meet a company like Zoetis and they get to hear from their professionals, that's somebody that's local here in North Carolina, then they start to connect those dots. That's a nice moment when you see that they're seeing, oh, wait a minute. I can take my interests, as diverse as they may be, and find a home for them in the poultry sector.
Yeah, it's such a great observation. I think in a lot of ways, the food animal sciences more generally, be it poultry or one of the other livestock related disciplines, I think maybe were the original interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary subject because you do cover such a broad range from engineering and housing to nutrition. And as you pointed out, they may never handle a bird, but could still have a really meaningful career supporting such a vibrant industry that's so economically important in many areas of our country and around the world. I want to ask you, Dr. Fosnaught, if you would, to pull out your crystal ball and look into the future a little bit. I love to ask everybody a crystal ball question on the podcast. If you look out 5, 10, 15 years into the future, pick your time horizon, how do you see the role of youth development programs evolving as it relates to poultry science? How you look at the way kids are being raised today, as you mentioned, like we're all more distracted in the devices and so on, or if it's just the demands that the industry and the workforce have. But how do you see that role evolving as you look into the crystal ball?
I think we need to capitalize again on what we have to offer, and that I'm getting more. I host 4-H club here on campus, and it's the Poultry Pack 4-H club, and I get people that are just coming to me saying, "My child loves animals and I want an opportunity. It doesn't matter to me what opportunity is. I just want to be able to connect them with animals. So if you're offering me that avenue, I'm going to take it." So that I think is we need to think about young people need to engage in more tangible things than I think ever before. When we look at kind of mental health of our young people is not on the upswing, it's declining. We are having some worse mental health outcomes. So what do we know that can help young people is if they feel connected, if they have hands-on learning experiences, and so poultry can do that. And so like 4-H embryology is another program that comes under my umbrella. And that is such a tactile thing that we can do in the classrooms and create a lot of education around that because life cycles where it supports our education curriculum, teaching life cycles, but we can teach so much more about broilers versus layers and proper care. And then again, that all your senses are engaged when you're working with animals. And I think we're not fully appreciating how important that is for young people. And if we can help educate the public that there is these opportunities, because know here in North Carolina, we've added the middle school component to our FFA program, and our populations are just growing all the time, giving young folks that opportunity. And we know that we've got 2 billion more people to feed coming on board in the planet. I believe it's a really noble occupation to be able to feed our citizens. And I think letting young people know that to be a part of that solution, why not be the leader of how that's done in the future? Like opening their eyes to what it actually is, especially as more and more of us are disconnected from farming than we've ever been before. So when you see those numbers, when I'm sharing with youth, it's 2% of our population, and I think it's actually less than that, is feeding the other 100% of us. So those folks are really important to all of us.
I think that's a great place to wrap up our conversation on a high note. Dr. Mary Fosnaught with North Carolina State University and the Prestige Department of Poultry Science. You're such a passionate advocate for 4-H, for young people, and for poultry science, all of the above. So thank you for sharing your insights and observations with us. I love the concept of the market poultry, the market turkey show. What a great way to connect kids and animals and really show them the opportunities for getting involved in such a vibrant, growing industry. Friends, if you enjoyed this conversation, love for you to be engaged with us, whether you're a student, educator, researcher, or industry professional. PSA membership gives you access to the latest in poultry science, networking opportunities, and a global community committed to advancing the field. If you haven't taken the opportunity to renew your membership yet, you can do so at poultryscience.org. This time next week, we will be in Atlanta, Georgia at the International Production and Processing Expo, IPPE, and the International Poultry Scientific Forum, IPSF. So stop by and see us either at the Scientific Forum or our booth at the trade show. Would love to have you drop by and say hello and connect and talk shop a little bit. If you're not already a member, well, maybe we'll sign you up while you're there. This episode was produced by Lindsay Johnston with editing and engineering by Michael Lund of Parasol. For the Poultry Science Association, I'm Andy Vance. See you next week.